um, and not just inflation in America, but
Yeah.
of all the inflated grocery items that you can encounter at the grocery store today, margarine in the last year, the highest item, 23 to 23.5% jump in inflation on margarine. So we need to do our patriotic duty, by continuing to purchase the margarine so that we can get on high blood pressure meds, so that we can keep the American pharmaceutical companies running, because they're just hurting for money so bad. We got to do our part. We need to be able to purchase the margarine. So I think that rates need to continue to come down so that everything else can be affordable, and that way we can keep on buying margarine like we're supposed to. Don't you agree?
I agree. Margarine is the number one staple in our food supply that we need to make sure that is continued to
Yeah.
be produced and consumed, because that's a key component of that's an ingredient in our whole
Right.
pharmaceutical cycle.
And if we can't just eat straight margarine out of the tub, then we need to be able to put it in all the baked goods that we need to stuff our faces with and continue.
Exactly. I mean, how else are we going to get more people on Medicaid and get more people and through the
Get them on Medicaid quicker. And get them on Medicaid quicker.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's a win-win. I mean, they need to make the margarine affordable. That's what this comes down to.
I think the rest of the prices should stay where they are, especially the healthy food. Keep letting it go higher. Right. But the margarine specifically, we need to bring those prices down.
Yeah, the organics can just, skyrocket. Who cares about that?
Yeah. Yeah, rich people, I mean, let them eat cake.
Right. With margarine on the next Operation Dopcast podcast.
We travel from IKEA and where we got our skin Bjorken skorken, and we talk about how we hit our thumbs so hard trying to get the pins in the side of the glucose board and other things.
Go through this internet black holes and be like, this is interesting. Oh, that's a cool video. And I would always do it with music. And the next thing I know, I'm listening to some, song from the 70s I've never heard of, but somebody was referenced, So you go through these black holes, and it's the same thing with whether it's YouTube Shorts or TikTok or anything like that. You just start, I'll find myself just like, scrolling through like, that's an interesting story. Oh, didn't know that. Okay. That's
when you have an endless amount of information at your fingertips.
Yeah. What is real?
Yeah.
What is real? How can you whittle or drill down to the core essence of any argument in 5 to 60 seconds?
Well,
and cover everything.
There's a question that comes with this. Who cares what's real? Really? Like, we're gonna have a generation that isn't going to be able to decipher the truth easily for such a long period of time. They're not going to even care what's real. It's not going to matter. And I would think, man, like this is another thing you constant headlines on is, with rates and mortgages and the ability to buy a home, and these kids that are a failure to launch situation, they can't move out of their parents or out of a renting situation and be a homeowner. And they've been trying to, they're following the rules and everything by the book, but yet you still can't. So that's one way that you lose your faith in the decision makers and the elites, I guess. But then same with technology. Okay, you can't rely on that system. Now this is another system you can't rely on because it's not telling you the truth, and it hasn't been telling you the truth. So do you care what the truth is? Like, if you know you can't control it, I would just think after a while that would just wear you down to the point where, okay, do I even want to investigate or get to the bottom of what's happening here? It's going to be a small percentage of the population that actually cares to do that.
You're right, because it takes effort. Who has the time, really? And we're supposed to be working, to fulfill the American dream, or if you have families, or if you want to enjoy the good life, or who has the time to really dive in and get granular into detail? So you have to trust somebody, right, to give you that information. And then as soon as you give your trust to somebody, then you're you could well be played a victim into any narrative that they need to feed you.
Exactly. What's the value in taking the time to research if you can't trust
Right.
the research? At the end of the day, it's all for nothing because you've gone down the wrong path unknowingly. I mean, you might be a source you trust or coming from somebody else, and they quote a source that you can trust. Like it goes back to, okay, well, I think this is the truth because I have reasons to base that on. Well, what if that was a farce all along? Like, I don't know. It's a little bit
It's like
scary
we talked.
that it's gonna take a while for people to be able to get past that, and I don't know what the solution to it is.
Well, I'd say two things to that is one, it harkens back to the last episode when we talked about is how do you trust the very experts that are basically just in one big pat each other on the back and cover for each other and support each other and lift each other up. And if you say anything different, then we're not going to include you. How do you trust those people? Because it's not about giving us good information to where we can make our own decisions. And I think that's part of the whole thing. That's there are forces at work, and I'd say those are the multiple coalitions, the multiple factions that want to make sure, and this has been true, I think, through the dawn of time. I'm not saying that these groups have been here since the dawn of time. But powerful people don't want to give away their power. Wealthy people really don't want to give away their wealth necessarily. It's all more. What can I do? They don't want to let go. So as you have these sustained, opportunities for growth, I mean, it's like the Dutch East India Company on steroids, but multiplied. There's many of those companies around the world now that is understood the value of you have the value of the economy of scale, right? So you can control entire supply chains. You can, mass produce whatever that might be to make sure that you're able to undercut the competition or make sure you have the lowest price or whatever you need to do. But you have that quantity of scale where you're able to globally at some point take over something. And at that point, you can still make a lot of money because it's the economy of scale. You have a lot of it. Whereas used to, that wasn't the case. So now you have all these companies that are able to, and it's the amassing of wealth at the top. It's just a natural paradigm of, it's not capitalism. It's not social. It's not any sort of economic system. It's the natural paradigm of interconnectivity. And those people that have power want to grow their power, want to dominate a market, want to dominate an industry, and they're not going to take any prisoners, literally or figuratively. I think that's a big point of it. So to your question, is it going to matter anymore? I think that's a great question. Is truth really relevant anymore? As long as you can live your life, do what you want to do, and they make sure they pacify enough people enough of the time to where there's no big revolution, there's nothing that upsets their apple cart. Like, they want to have us at our throats. They're going to do the tribalism, push different narratives, something for us to be focusing on each other. But we have to look at the top. And I'm not going to say the Occupy Wall Street movement was good in its ways or objectives, but I will say that there's some truth to it, that the economic decisions that affect everybody are not made by everybody, right? Like we all make our own microeconomic decisions in our household, right? Some good, some bad, that do influence our success or our failures. But on a grand scale, talking inflation, inflationary, right, the Fed Reserve, economic policy, all of those things, that affects everybody. Everybody doesn't have a voice. And you look, where is a lot of, it's, World Economic Forum. I keep saying, that thing is, there's so much control of what our future is going to look like. Does truth matter? They're probably going to, it's all, a lot of it's on purpose, probably.
Well, and now their relationship with the World Health Organization too, after the pandemic, is that raising any eyebrows for anyone yet? But you mentioned success there, so it kind of makes me think, if if the individual's success is now determined by someone else and other factors, you've taken away the opportunity of the individual to make their own success, because someone else is crafting this path for you. They're going to decide, do you get approved for a loan? I mean, that's just one place of where it could start, but name it what it is. If it's academia, someone's deciding the grade already based on, do you fall in line with the narrative? Do you fall in line with all these other rules? Did you follow all these predetermined, like roadways of success that have been laid out for you? And if you don't follow them, then you don't have a prayer. Like, really. And even still, the deck could be stacked against you to where there's nothing you can do. Hence the whole housing situation right now. I mean, people are still getting priced out. I mean, even with all the sacrifice, with inflation, flying in their face every day, and still can't get there. I mean, it's already decided who can get there and who won't be able to get there. So that's the sad reality.
Yeah. What's the guy's name? Said, you will own nothing and you'll be happy. This is Klaus Schwab. So he's the guy that's over. Yeah, he's the founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum since 1971. Yeah, there's a whole thing on this guy. It's crazy. He's the one that said, in the future you will own nothing and you will be happy. It's a utopian, but it's dystopia. It's strange.
Yeah, it kind of is. But this is where the generation gap is going to have wildly different opinions on this guy, or anything close to, this doctrine that he's outlining here. So if you have nothing and are happy, then if you're a younger person now today, if I'm 20 years old today, I'm probably thinking, that sounds pretty great. I'm not struggling. Things are provided for me. I don't have to worry about this massive inflation. I don't have to work as hard. I'm going to be okay. Versus you and I, or older generations, who are going to be like, whoa, hold the phone. That's not what I want. That's not the world I want to live in. And how hard is it to change your mentality from, grind your whole life, and if you're fortunate enough and you make all these right decisions, then you're going to be able to own everything you've ever wanted to own. That's definitely true. It's America's been built on that mentality, but you can't just switch to this overnight and say that's okay.
Well, the term life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness was originally life, liberty, and the pursuit of land. The idea of the United States was property. Leaving property rights, having ownership, where you didn't have feudal overlords that owned everything, and you were happy because people weren't happy. Right. And it's weird to be like, it's a regression. And I think any type of push by any politician or any community organizer or any influencer to push this way, it's a regression, because it's a regression away from the individual. It's a regression from individuals being able to find their own happiness.
And I think taxation is the barometer of that happiness, right? Because in a sense, okay, if you're a feudal lord, the Earl of Sandwich comes around and says, pay up, it's time to pay up, and more and more and more and more, to the point where, okay, this isn't a good system anymore because I'm taxed to the point where I can't take it. So it is the World Economic Forum or BlackRock or any of, if they had their way and their vision, it's going to end up being the same thing. You don't get something for nothing. Well, how are you paying for the something that's being provided for you? Taxes. So the tax burden is just going to go through the roof, and is that something that's one of those things where, the younger population needs to read past the headline to really understand.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what's the true cost of that sort of, utopia or dystopia, if you're you and I, to that, So.
Yeah, and this is the group that pushes. I mean, they're tied in with the WHO, UN. They're tied in with the climate change agenda is generally pushed. Starting out with the World Economic Forum, and that's one of the whole. This is the group that's saying, hey, we need to kind of control industries and what you can, how much air conditioner you can have, your utility usage. They're getting rid of cattle. I don't know if you've seen this in Europe already. And there's been protests over that because in Europe, they're saying, oh, because of global warming and now people are hungry, people are not able to eat. And the whole idea is, well, that's too bad. We're
over the 0.01% of methane gas production that those cattle produce.
Right.
I mean, they want people to stop breathing next. I mean, what are you supposed to do? But the question that I have then is, okay, so the World Economic Forum itself, what really is their authority? I mean, other than it's a collection of powerful people, powerful individually, that could help make these decisions. So now you're getting them together to have even more influence by joining up with those groups, like you said, like especially the World Health Organization, because they've already tested the waters with all the regulations with COVID. So I think that's potentially going to be a way that they're thinking, okay, well, how else can we control populations with what policies we can make? Don't you think?
I agree. I think that's the point. It's coalitions. You have groups that understand if they work together, they and their own will be better in the future. So they might have different agendas, but they can come back and say, hey, if we can have a ready, willing population in certain areas of the world to get the resources, get the do some of the manual labor that we need, do some of the different types of farming. And then we have different areas of the world that is, more financial nature or what have you. They can start, basically fixing what our global economy is as it stands today. And that's kind of the attempt. And it's just weird to me because that's like saying, okay, we're done. We're done innovating. We're done doing new things. Yeah. We're done, 18-year-old comes out with an idea. Well, how is he going to get that idea if he and bring that to fruition if his family isn't able to own a house to where he's able to use the equity in his house to be able to fund his business, to be able to start his business, that generational wealth, that own wealth to where, you and I pay into a mortgage payment knowing, hey, the bank's making money, but we're not paying a landlord. This is our equity. So we can pass this down to whoever we want to, or keep it and retire off of it, or whatever we want to do. That takes all that away. And we become renters. The ownership is gone. We're basically just renters and producers and consumers. And I'm going to cut real quick to something because you said, what did you say about breathing?
They want us to stop breathing? I knew it.
Now scientists say breathing is bad for the environment. Gases we exhale contribute to 0.1% of at least the UK's greenhouse gas emissions. This was published December 13th, 2023, and that's from dailymail.com. That's the headline. Speaking about headlines, but you can look that up. Just say breathing is bad for the environment. Type that up and you'll get the article. You can read the details. Yes.
Hey, well,
they want to decrease. It's weird.
Hey, but speaking of decreasing the population, did you get to read Jonathan Swift's A Modest Proposal? Because it's another way of decreasing the population, fixing the population problem. But wait a minute. So they want us to stop breathing, but okay, so this is the UK that we're talking about. But at least they don't have the same problem here, where we have a whole lot more people living in the US now that we have basically an open border. So we're going to have a lot more people breathing here. So what are we supposed to do about that?
I don't know. Plant more trees.
Plant more trees. That's the answer.
So
speaking
but to the point, aren't we feeding the flora and fauna of the world with our breath? Like, isn't that this is the one thing I don't understand. And I get pollutants, pollutants in the environment, I understand cleaning that up. Acid rain, that was a big thing when I was a kid. I
Mhm.
remember going to the
Yeah.
environmental things, science, acid rain. I
Oh,
get
yeah.
that.
They really pushed
Garbage in
that.
the
Yeah.
ocean. Yeah, garbage in the ocean. I get it. Like it's killing wildlife, etc. And I also get like I get the whole thing where you say, hey, there's climate change. It's going to raise the waters, it's damaging, it's still doing bad stuff. But aren't those greenhouse gases? Isn't that supposed to feed greenery? Isn't the world greener than it's been in like hundreds of years?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the other thing is methane gas. So being a climate change contributor. So 12% of all US greenhouse gas emissions are from human activities that they say. So creating methane gas.
How
While
much?
the cattle,
How much was that?
12%. So, okay, if you feed your cattle a genetically modified corn, and then that creates greenhouse gas emissions, that there's an impact to that. Okay, yeah, that's a really, really small, like really less than a percentage. Okay, so everything should be grass fed. Well, then just increase how much grass fed cattle, but you have to then subsidize the farmer to be able to do that and continue to produce. Don't slap them with more regulations and more taxes to be able to do that and still produce the same. It doesn't work that way. I mean, farmers already spent hundreds of years trying to get more efficient to provide more food for more of the population, especially as it grows. And then that's really where genetically modified seed comes in. Is, well, we have to produce more because we just have to. We have this many people to feed. And how much do we want to import? Do we want to continue to import from Brazil, China? Like, because we do now. We have to, for how many people we have to feed. And now we have a whole lot more people to feed. So if we keep developing at the rate we are and putting more and more regulations on farmers, which now the average age of the farmer is over 60 years old, no one is lining up to be farmers, at least on the scale that we need them to be, to produce the amount of food this country is going to need in a really short amount of time. That should be scaring everyone, because now we're even more reliant on other countries to import our foods. That takes our control away. Not that the USDA, does a stellar job of approving the food we eat now, but at least it's here. The food's already here, and we're not getting it from all we need from other countries. So the barriers to entry for farmers is a concern. I mean, they should be handing people money to start farms in this country.
But that the Bill Gates would just take that money and buy, another couple thousand acres of land. So what is that like, with the big farms, the big corporate farms versus the farmer? Are the farmers just getting employed by the big corporate farms? How is that work? How is that dynamic? Because so many are retiring. They're older. You said 60 years old or older is the average farmer age.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So who's doing the work for the?
A lot of them are full now. A lot of European or South American farmers or like corporate farms are buying U.S. land to farm, but it's not American owned. So it's at least being used for the right purpose and not developed as of yet. But what's more important, I guess, providing more housing or providing more food. And you can make points on both sides of that, but that's a way bigger picture, like outlook. But you got to believe that if the whole climate agenda is like has their way, then is it more important to say you have 10 acres to make it a wind farm, a solar farm, to create a sustainable energy out of it rather than produce food? How do you do both? What does that look like? So, I mean, that's a big change that's going to have to get figured out pretty quickly. I mean, within the next decade, I would think. So,
Do you think that some of the open border policies are to backfill the agricultural workforce in the United States? Like, and I say that
in
realistically,
some parts,
low cost labor
in some
for,
parts of, yeah, yeah, I think so. In some parts of the U.S., California has more organic farms than anywhere, but there's a growing demand for organic food there. Not as much outside the state of California. There still is, but it's in the major metropolitan areas. So, pick those pockets out. But those areas, that have the people to do it, they have such a demand that, Northern California organic radish farms have to be able to ship that product to Boston. So, yeah, they have to keep the supply up and keep it going. So all those people in Boston can have organic radishes. So,
Yeah.
that part is going to be a need too, because it's jobs that, especially now, we already see it with a lot of our own population where we don't have the workforce to even work in the fast food industry. Are we going to have
Right.
anybody to work in the food producing industry?
Yeah, it's a crazy dynamic. Just as the economies change, they constantly do, and then the politics that go along with it that affect what happens, and the changes in the future. It's just so weird to me, and it seems like that big money, and this is what we've talked about. Big money is pushing out, or at least biding their time until the individual farmer or farmer family are going away, buying up what they can as it happens, and then getting their labor, low cost labor, bringing it in across the border, because like nobody wants to work, with cost. It's weird. Nobody wants to work. It seems like,
It's true.
but
In every industry, you talk to
yeah,
somebody who's complaining about having an issue with labor, whether it's being able
yeah,
to afford it or being able to just have the manpower to show up every day is
yeah,
a struggle.
yeah,
I mean, from anything like your gas stations to the fast food to the farm work, like it's all the non-sexy work that
right.
somebody still has to do to keep things going, or we just don't keep those things going. But then just like end of the pandemic, like you heard, well, why is Wendy's closed at 2 PM? Because nobody showed up to work. Like it's
Right.
that simple.
Yeah. I mean, it's weird. I'm curious as to the workforce dynamics that would contribute to that, but there are so many
Well,
people
the
that are
stimulus, right? I mean, the
right,
stimulus was the first
right.
factor. But all that money's long run out by now.
Yeah. How
I
are
think,
people still? I can't figure out how people live in California. Like it's like New York City in the late 1800s. People are living like 4 families to a house. The moms and the dads of all the families have 2-3 jobs. It's
so
crazy.
now you're after the exodus that kind of happened with California in the last year. I think you're going to see more of it go back, because they just now, I think as of today, became the first state to allow healthcare for undocumented workers.
Oh my God. Have mercy on all of us.
Yep, it's true.
This
I
is
think
how.
as of yesterday. Did you see that?
No, I did. I missed that one. Man, this is how
Your
Rome.
jaw about hit the floor just now.
This is how Rome fell. I mean, you have in Chicago and in Northern Illinois, you can have non-citizens be police officers. In California now, you have to provide health coverage for a worker that's not a citizen.
Yes.
Which you're not even. I didn't think you weren't even supposed to hire them according to federal regulations.
Well, you know how California operates.
Right, they do their thing.
They're their own country. They have the big enough GDP to.
But yeah, this is how Rome
Yeah.
fell. You know, they had different groups of people coming out that whose Roman interests were not their interests, because they were
Mhm.
their own cultural groups, come in and become part of the Praetorian Guard. You know, the Romans stopped wanting to be in their own military, so they got people that were in, you know, not Roman, that were in the military, and then basically they got to choose who the emperor was. They weren't Roman, but they were choosing the emperor.
Mhm.
And it's okay,
Yeah.
if we're going to do all this, this is, you know, you can look at Rome to see it's kind of like the United States is Rome on steroids. California becomes first state to offer health insurance to all undocumented immigrants. 700,000 adults.
So there you have it.
Wow.
Yeah, I was pretty surprised. Like that one kind of got either quietly promoted, or it was all that was just leading up to this all along. But then it's funny how as soon as California does something, like, I mean, they with like the minimum wage thing. Okay, so like as soon as they do, then at least me being in a neighboring state, we're the next to get the effects, right?
Right.
I mean, just like the gas prices, but like it will go eastward, it'll go eastward, and that will eventually catch on, and as like the norm, it becomes normalized. So, yeah,
it's weird. I don't get it. Yeah, and part of that normalization is you saw it with the DEI stuff. It's, you know, the politicians in California who are dictating all this stuff for all these companies. It's weird. State politicians are the ones that are dictating all of the diversity, equity, and inclusion and all those programs, because they were saying, hey, if you want us to, and you to Vanguard, BlackRock, whatever, to have our pension and manage our pension, the state pension, California, one of the largest economies in the world, all the companies that we invest in are going to have this. So that's when it goes in. It's so weird. In one state, leftist or whatever ideology it is has that much influence on the economy, the workforce, companies. It's very strange. That it's interesting bedfellows that are laying together.
yes. Yeah, it is. But it's almost like everything else we've already kind of touched on. You're like the big money elite. It's like, who is really spinning all of it? But it's mixed together. It's because it's so far reaching in all these industries, right? It's not limited to really anything.
I wonder, I'm going to have to, and maybe this is something that we talk about next time, because this is, or I do on a History Funhouse episode, but Karl Marx, I think he was right theoretically on a lot of things, but I have to look and see how he describes who would be controlling the utopia, because it seems like that's the effort. It's, you go through that industrial revolution, you go through the capitalism, all of that aspect, and then it's, you're going to just be happy and everybody's going to be able to live their life, and we're going to control everything. I wonder if it's the trajectory, I should say, of communism, where the utopia is that the overlords of the utopia is the corporations. And
it would have to be because especially after going through capitalism, there would have to be so much prolonged suffering through capitalism that you have so many more have-nots than haves, in a major way, that you've basically wiped out all need for comparison, in any way, so that your fellow man is exactly the same as you. I still can't quite comprehend, maybe this is my capitalist mind, is how that achieves utopia in a modern world. Now, I also think, obviously Marx, came through with all of his ideas in a time that had no social media. So his ideas were written down and shared deliberately with who he wanted to share them with and when. And so in today's world, you can't introduce anything close to, I mean, things get leaked so fast and easy. Could anything like that even stand? I mean, it's kind of like we compare policies to what would the founding fathers say, about a lot of the stuff we're doing. I mean, now with social media and how fast and easy information is shared, and especially the point where anyone can have an opinion and chime in on it and influence other people's opinions about it, before it could even go anywhere. It's like, I don't know how the utopia gets there. Even if we wanted it to, if we had enough people that wanted it to, could it really? I don't know if it could in this country.
I think it goes to a social score, like what they have in China. Because if they can somehow create or enforce a full social score, that's how you do it. Because they're going to want to have enough people that shut down, and maybe that was a test run during COVID, is to get enough people that were boosted. Like, and I say boosted, not with the booster, but I'm saying their influence was boosted if they said one thing, and their influence was diminished or removed entirely if they were counter to that point. And I think that, using speech as a indicator of what they're trying to do, they could technically enforce speech without doing anything with speech. And so maybe they're not worried about the little,
I can see that.
They're not worried about the little groups that have their little thing. They're going to have the FBI. That's the kind of what they've done before, is just sit inside, instigate some stuff and then shut it down, use them as examples. Like some entrapment cases or something like that. And there are going to be some that they, want to shut down because they think they're trying to overthrow the government, but it's going to be small enough, and they're going to be able to compartmentalize them enough, use technology to be able to isolate and control and remove. I could see it. And it's the point is, it's not a utopia. And that's what everyone has to understand, because you can't, dude, you think about all the stuff that we have coming towards us in the very, very near future in a home near you, all the artificial intelligence. So all the amount of Google Homes and Alexas and Siris, the TVs that we have, the phones that we have that can, if they're not, they are listening, and they have the ability to listen, gather all this information, all this data. We have a person, our phone knows probably more about us than we do. It can remember things about us that we can't remember
every day. Yep.
And you have, you look at the TikTok thing that we were talking about earlier, so much information. I can see, it takes people to say no, have an open conversation saying no, like there's a limit. We can't sacrifice our individuality for convenience or for the greater social good, because the greater social good is never served.
You're quoting Ayn Rand now.
The greater social good is never served if the individual is not served. Only the people controlling the system are served. That's it. And that's what people, I think, have to realize. That was the fallacy. But no,
I agree with the individualism thing. Like, it doesn't matter. Convenience is already taken over for individualism, because you've got such a just beaten up, demoralized country now, especially like the youth of it. And they're just like, the apathy is set in. It's just like, okay, whatever. That giving up control, privacy, your success plan, whatever that looks like, everything that you're supposed to want to have at, when you're young, is just like, you see these kids walking around just like they're beat up, like they're just like emotionally, mentally, physically, they're just down. And it's like, you can't, like, they won. They won. What the hell? Come on. Like, get up and do something. Like,
yeah,
you can fight it. I just want to like coach these like young people that are like, it's not over. You're not down. Like,
it's not over.
Can and do it. Like, no matter how beat up you are, you still can. But you see it on their faces, just like walking down the street. It's kind of depressing. You know, is
It
it because
is.
rent's too high and you can't afford anything, or is it because you see a million images of things other people have? Getting back to your, point, like, of things, and that makes you sad because you don't have the resources to get all the things that you see on the internet that are put in front of your face every day, every 5 minutes. Like, is that it? Like, is that the reason? And if it is, then there's some reevaluating that needs to be done. But
Yeah. Ultimately, everything is hackable. And if we are depending upon technology with all of the artificial intelligence things that are coming up, all of the information that we're giving to everybody and their kids and their daughters and their neighbors and whomever, all of the things that everybody knows about us that we don't know they know, from the purchases that we make on Amazon and that history, to the cookies that they put on your device so they can see where else you're looking and what else you're into and all that stuff, the interest, the profiles that they have on you, all that stuff, everything is hackable. So even if you believe that the people that are trying to make a difference in the world and, make it for a better place and using technology, Elon Musk, incredible.
hey, no attention to that
Incredible
man
mind.
behind the curtain.
Incredible man. But even his technology, it's that him and his companies are developing, it's hackable. And so if you have somebody and you're looking at, say, oh, they're going to do it for good, the government's good, and maybe you believe that, maybe you don't, but if that's your belief, everything's going to be good, and I'm just going to put my blind faith in the experts and the expertise, and technology is going to be great. Everything can fall in an instant. As soon as a malevolent person, actor, force, government, corporation, whomever it is able to hack whatever that matrix, whatever that mainframe, whatever that individual system is, then you're done for. And that's what it's scary to look and say, hey, and maybe it's not a person, maybe it's artificial intelligence, maybe it becomes conscious, maybe this is Terminator. I don't know. But that's what's scary as you look into the future is too many people are down, depressed, they're giving their control away, they're seeing, they're happily giving away their rights. And I heard Dr. Stephen Kotkin, who is a professor, I forget what university, but I'm going to paraphrase, but it's a quote I love. I'm just going to paraphrase. He said something to the effect of, the only thing more evil than communism, or maybe he said socialism, but the only thing more evil than communism is free people voting for communism. And it's a thought that, you have to look and say, you're going to give away those individual rights, individual liberties, and you can't do that. You just can't do it. You can't trade it away.
But if the brainwashing is thorough and goes on long enough, and they can not even just brainwashing in the sense of steering you to a specific idea, but in a general way of thinking about the outlook, your whole worldview in general, changing to the point where you will willingly vote for that because someone's made you think that is what you want. Because we can take away pain and suffering and hardship, in not just financially, but like create the utopia, right? Like, if they can do that through information campaigning, and it's already underway, like, it just has to go on long enough for somebody to be like, you know what, that does sound like a good idea. You wouldn't even know how fast the transformation happens. I mean, what's it take? 2 to 3 generations worth of people?
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. That's what I was going to respond with. It's generational. They've got to get the next generation. Mm-hmm. They've got to control. They've got they get the majority of the teachers, get the majority of the higher education. Make sure that the states can say that a child doesn't have to give information to a parent, but if they give it to the state, so the state is superseding a parent's rights and authority. Mm-hmm. You have a captive audience, of youth on social media. You can develop the next generation of leaders. Once they become 40, 50 years old, their experience is not going to be our experience of 9/11 and Iraq and Afghanistan. And then we see how so many people in that generation were, yeah, let's go get them. And then they soured really, really, really bad just to see, they're not going to have the opportunity.
to see the bad parts of that and the wrong decisions and the lies and everything. They're not going to be able to see that. They control the narrative. And I see what you're saying. That's why I'm scared, but
Yeah.
there's hope.
Yeah.
There's always hope.
What would you think if it's 1979, 1980, it's the Carter administration, the U.S. Embassy gets hit by Iran, and oil embargo hits instantly. Prices of everything go up. Oil's, through the roof. Everything's crazy expensive. Interest is through the roof. People still supported that because the U.S. Embassy got hit, and that was the reason. They didn't like the result, but at least it was understandable, and people were like, that's just what it's got to be. Like now, and we have, what was inflation then was like, what was it, to borrow money was like 15 to 20%. It was something nuts. Like now people complain about 7, 8, 9%. It's not even half of what it was then. To borrow money. Borrowing money is expensive.
By the time officials concluded a conference call on December 5th, 1980, they hiked the target range by 2 percentage points to 19 to 20%, its highest ever.
Highest ever.
Yeah.
That's why, think about now, what would the reaction now be to 20%? Like it's been done. It was done then. If that happened now, it would, I mean, would anybody be that surprised? I guess not, but would that would halt everything.
Yeah.
I mean, auto production, everything.
It was bad then. And I think it's a good point to harken back to those days. But at that point, we still had a common enemy or a perceived enemy in the Soviet Union. You got to think, is this, we've got Russia again. Is this, the new Cold War? It's right. Annoying. Yeah. 20%. That's ridiculous. They did change from Carter to Reagan. So I think they did get
Berlin Wall's down now.
Yeah. It's we won. Wait.
I just say for perspective, right? Like this is something when I hear someone, younger complaining and then someone older chiming in, like, you still got it, made the shade, it's all relative, right?
Yeah, it is all relative. And I think there's truth and falsehoods in both the arguments. So hear me out. When I hear somebody say houses are so expensive now, yes, they are. Absolutely. You look at the average price of a house now, and I'll see if I can find this average price of a house now, but then compare it to the average size of a house.
$400,000.
Average price versus average size. It's not if you look at it by price per square foot, it maybe is a little higher than inflation, but it's not as significant as one would seem. So if people were still buying the same size houses as they were buying in 1975 and 1985, if they were still buying those sized houses, the houses wouldn't be the prices that they are on average. Now, those smaller houses, they still are selling higher. They did go higher, absolutely. But it's not as, if you look at it, average cost per square foot, it's not as significant outside of inflation. So on the other hand, I could say, if you get the same, you're arguing a point of saying, oh, the houses are so expensive. If you get a house that's the same size of a house that your parents got when they were your age, then it's not going to be as bad for you. But you're trying to get that big McMansion. Everybody's going for the McMansion. Like that's why that's a big key component of it. But the other side is the amount of corporate ownership of residential houses.
This is part of the owning nothing and loving it.
But it has shot up significantly, which has put the pressures on housing.
Yeah.
And so you look at the housing market. If
What
you
about
look at a house,
what about the impact of
should.
Airbnb though too? I mean, you have people who do have the beats. Okay, a second home. I'm going to Airbnb it out. Well, I know in certain like pockets of the U.S., in certain countries, certain places, communities where that's happening a lot. Like places that were desirable, but the people that live there are priced out of living in their own community now because somebody else came in, bought it, and it's an Airbnb now. It's no longer available to be someone's home.
Exactly, just a rental property where that used to be intentionally built that way in vacation areas. A scary factor for our economy, and a scary indicator of the future. But I would say if you're upset about the prices of the houses, you should look at a similar house in size as one back in the day. It's still going to be a little bit more expensive, but it's not as significant as what the average home price is. That's my thought.
Hey, but I saw on Instagram that, this guy who does what I do for a living and, makes the same as I do, or has comes from the same place, whatever you want to say, you're comparing now to like, oh, well, then I should be able to get that, whatever square footage you're trying to achieve in your home too. And it's just what do I have? And it's another way to keep up with the Joneses. So
I think it's a sin that so many people have become too much acquainted with, is that envy, is seeing, what somebody else has. And it can drive people to depression. It can just drive people to, some people, they'll find a competitive nature, figure it out and be like, hey, I'm going to figure something out and make it. But I think that's why it's considered a sin. It's damaging to you. You look at other people and be like, oh, I should have that. And saying, okay, how is it that they have that? They're doing the same thing I'm doing, but were they lucky in life? Did they get parents gave them something, as their spouse come in with money, or did they, or are they so far in debt that if they don't make it this year, then they're going to be homeless? You don't know.
What it is it? Yeah. Does it look like what it really is? Or is it not? Looks are deceiving.
Or is it
with that?
Like a rapper
vanity ties right into it.
It's the rapper photo shoot. That's not their mansion.
Yeah. Right.